This is the routine Thursday weekly briefing for Central North Carolina following Hurricane Isaias, that made landfall near Ocean Isle, North Carolina late Monday night and Tuesday morning with an 87-mile-an-hour wind gust down there. There was a 74-mile-per-hour gust at the airport in Wilmington, North Carolina. And tropical storm force winds extended back into the coastal plain in Raleigh's area of responsibility, generally east of I-95. And we had about 2 to 4 inches of rain from roughly US 1 and points eastward. We did have a couple of rivers or river points in flood along the Neuse at both Clayton and Smithfield. Those have both fallen below flood stage. And really there's not a whole lot of evidence around Central North Carolina of the passage of the hurricane and tropical storm, with those impacts now clean up in the eastern part of the state from both the tropical storm and hurricane related gusts and also a number of tornadoes. So the pattern for the next week, and again, this covers through next Wednesday, there's a stationary front situated over the southern middle Atlantic states, roughly from northern and central Virginia, southwestward across the western and northern portions of North Carolina today. That front's forecast to move very little over the next couple of days. Temperatures this morning were actually down in the 40s and 50s across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley and down even into the mid-Mississippi Valley. So a much more refreshing air mass to the cool and west side of that front. But here in central and eastern North Carolina, we're stuck with dew points in the 70s, very humid air mass, typical of this time of year. So we anticipate showers and storms today, focusing along that front from Virginia down into North Carolina. Some of those could be strong to severe, and we'll touch on that in just a couple of minutes. And locally heavy rainfall and a risk of flooding will also accompany those storms. With time, the front's forecast to drift slowly eastward while weakening through Saturday. And so we're not really going to have much of a focus left by the time we get into the weekend. And as a result, we just get into a return to a typical summertime pattern with Bermuda high pressure extending westward into the southeastern United States and a lee trough in the lee of the Appalachian Mountains, and generally temperatures close to or a little bit above average as we get into the early to middle part of next week, and just typical afternoon and evening, generally isolated to scattered showers and storms during that forecast period. This is a look at the accumulated precipitation forecast for the next 7 days. Most of the heavier precipitation is expected to fall from Virginia into the northern and western Piedmont of North Carolina through tonight. So again, we anticipate those scattered showers and storms to develop here in the next couple of hours with the heating of the day once some of these lower clouds continue to lift and dissipate. And some of those showers and storms could stick around for a good part of the night, particularly across the Piedmont. So it may be a case where you may hear some rumbles of thunder overnight, particularly around Raleigh and points northwestward up into the Triad. And then lesser chances of showers and storms and lower precipitation amounts for the rest of the forecast period. We could have a lingering relatively maximum tomorrow as that front drifts eastward into central North Carolina, supported weakly by a passing upper level trough. But then again, we get into a very typical, just random nature of the afternoon and evening showers and storms for the rest of the forecast period. So for today and tonight, we're in both a marginal risk for severe thunderstorms capable of producing primarily tree damage, which is typical of this time of year, and lightning, of course, with any thunderstorm, and also a marginal risk for excessive rain through tonight. There's a small area of a slight risk for excessive rainfall from Virginia down into the far northern counties of North Carolina. And again, that would be for some slower moving showers and storms through tonight. We had some flooding rain just to the northwest of the triad yesterday and last night. And in fact, there were 3 to 4 inches of rain just northwest of Winston-Salem up toward Mount Airy and Dobson in those areas. And so again, those threats should diminish overnight, certainly by tomorrow. But if you are in and near those storms today, be advised that both damaging winds and some flooding will be possible with both. Here's a look at the severe weather outlook for the remainder of the forecast period, the next couple of days. Just general thunder Friday and Saturday after we get through that marginal risk for today. And no organized severe weather expected through the forecast period, which again is very typical of this time of year. Very little wind shear that supports the organization that thunderstorms need to produce anything more than just a little bit of small hail here and there, and more likely some of those damaging wind gusts capable primarily of tree damage. The tropics are relatively quiet. There's a disturbance to the southwest of Bermuda, generally about halfway between the Bahamas and Bermuda, and that system is forecast to continue to weaken. It's become a lot less organized over the last 24 hours, and the formation chance through both the next 48 hours and 5 days is near zero. So very little threat from that system and anywhere else in the tropics for the foreseeable future. So that's good news given all the excitement that we had over the last week. The outlook for the 2-week period, once we get past the 7-day period, is for somewhat above normal chances of precipitation and temperatures. Although with that pattern developing of a relatively typical summertime regime, it may be that we're a little bit closer to near average with respect to the precipitation amounts. But certainly we will keep an eye on that as we get closer in time. But it does look like we'll get some warming and drying influence from that Bermuda high, particularly up in the mid-levels, that will expand westward into the southeastern U.S. So it may be that it's a warmer and somewhat drier period by the time we get into that 2-week period covering August 13th to the 19th. But again, we've got some time to monitor that. So in summary, for the remainder of the week into next week, we've got the marginal risk for both severe weather from the damaging winds and also excessive rain and flooding through tonight. We do have a couple of more days of mostly 80s. It seems like we were in a stretch there for really the entire month of July with temperatures in the 90s and very uncomfortable humidity levels that contributed to, it seemed like, day after day of heat index values over 100. Thankfully, we have turned that corner, at least in the near term, and had a nice run of mostly 80s in the last several days, and we'll continue that for a couple of more before we turn slightly hotter, generally into the lower 90s for the weekend and into next week. And again, just a typical summertime pattern of the random, isolated to scattered showers and storms, mainly during the afternoon and lingering into the evening hours before dissipating through the forecast period. And that concludes the routine Thursday weekly briefing. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you have a good rest of your week and a wonderful weekend ahead.